I am building my very own life-size animatronic Claptrap, and I think it's time for another update video. That's because it's been a while since my last one. Now you might ask, why has it been so long? And to explain, let me show you a box. Nope, wait, there's another one. Hold on, let's just in case you missed the label. That's right, I've got two rather large boxes filled with hundreds of revisions, prototypes, and failed parts. Now, as you can see, there's quite a few parts. Now, I want to show that making something complex like this involves making mistakes. So many mistakes. But today we're talking about successes, asterisk, because I have a version of Claptrap's arm that I really enjoy. And I think you might enjoy it too. Now, Claptrap has a lot of other features that I'm going to cover in future videos, but his arm is so complicated that it deserves its own feature. Now, it's a pretty complicated thing, and you might be wondering, wow, how am I going to control this very complex mechanism? Well, I am not going to sit down and painstakingly animate or program him. So instead, I painstakingly built this. This is a custom motion capture device called a Waldo, and this is how I'm going to control Claptrap. So let's just get into it. Now, I want Claptrap to be as expressive as possible, and he usually emotes with his long, gangly arms. Now, thankfully, even though he's a robot, he does have a pretty similar construction and range of motion to humans. You know, he's got a hand, a wrist, an elbow, and a shoulder, which I don't know why I'm pointing out to you as if you've never seen a human body before, but I don't know what else to do with my hands while I'm describing them. Thankfully, Claptrap doesn't have creepy little robot fingers. Instead, he's just got two simple flaps. To keep my design simple, I added gear teeth where the flaps rotate so that they move in unison. There's no room for motors right here, so the flaps are driven by cables. These slide through a hole in the wrist and into a PTFE tube down to a servo near the elbow. This other servo has a similar cable loop that attaches to the wrist. To hide the servos a little bit, I added a couple of shell pieces, so now I've got a relatively compact forearm. These Dynamixel servos are daisy-chained, so I've got a connection across his elbow. In order to move the elbow, which is also pretty small, I'm using a linkage. The servo itself is tucked away in what is effectively his bicep, so that keeps the weight of his arm down for the shoulder motors. This arrangement isn't game accurate, but too bad. It works, and it's really serviceable. I even made use of this lighter segment, which in my design is a little access hatch so I can route cables inside. Now, since Claptrap's shoulder has a similar range of motion to a human arm, that means I need 3 degrees of freedom that will allow him to rotate, move in and out, and up and down. I'm sure there's anatomical terminology for that, but I'm not going to look it up. This is my take on his shoulder, and I'm really quite happy with how compact it is. Inside, you can see the main servo that allows the forward and back motion. It's geared down 2-to-1 with some SLS printed herringbone gears. The shoulder itself rides in a large bearing. Inside the inner diameter of that bearing, I've tucked 2 more servos that have the cutest timing belts you've ever seen. These connect to combination pulleys/miter gears that both come together to one output gear. This gear is riding on this bearing block, and this special arrangement is a kind of differential. But instead of one input going to 2 outputs like in a car, you've got 2 motors driving one input. This way, if the motors are both moving in the same direction, the arm rotates. But if they're moving in opposite directions, then the arm will raise up. Now, this design looks super clean, but there's kind of an issue. I don't know what position the arm is in, because the output depends on the positions of both motors, and even though I know both of those positions, it can still start in an undefined state, which is kind of a problem. And even if I added sensors to measure that angular position, I have another issue in that it's not rigid enough, and the gears are slipping, which further compounds the not knowing what position the arm is in problem. So as much as I love this design, frankly, I just want Claptrap to work and be robust. So into the trash this revision goes. Say hello to the 4th version of Claptrap's shoulder. In this version, I've isolated the rotation and elevation of his arm to independent motors. It's a bit bulkier, but it's much easier to control and service and assemble. It's just better.
Oh yeah, and this is at least the 4th major version. I've gathered as many of the previous ARM prototype 3D prints here, and yeah, it's a lot. Making everything lightweight, easy to assemble, functional, and aesthetically pleasing isn't easy. So I've been doing a lot of prototyping and a lot of 3D printing. You can see the evolution of part of Claptrap's wrist here. There's no good orientation for FDM printing in this case. This current version is printed in ABS-like plastic on Elegoo's Saturn IV Ultra, which is an MSLA resin printer. The part looks and works fantastically, but I need to print much bigger parts. So when Elegoo offered to send over their new Centauri Carbon, I happily agreed. I've printed dozens and dozens of parts on the Centauri Carbon, primarily out of Elegoo's Rapid PET G. I can confidently say that is a workhorse, and a fast one at that. It's fully enclosed Core XY with a 256mm cubed build volume and a large, responsive touchscreen.
And the workflow is dead easy. I've got this brand new elbow revision that I want to test out, so I'm just going to send this mesh over to the Elegoo slicer. Once I've dialed in my print settings, I'm going to go ahead and send this over to the machine, which has a built-in camera so I can keep an eye on things. An hour and a half later, I've got a beautiful brand new part, which hopefully won't go into my box of hopes and dreams. I've been using my Centauri Carbon for months now, and I have been recommending it to friends. So if you are in the market for a new 3D printer, consider checking out the Centauri Carbon. Be sure to use my link in the description, and thanks again to Elegoo for sponsoring this video.
So I've got this nice detailed arm, but my Claptrap is a fairly complex machine. I don't just have to control one arm, I've got two, and his eye, his disk drive, his antenna, his landing gear, his main wheel, and his secret inner motors. I'm not building an autonomous robot. That's crazy. I'm building an advanced animatronic. So how am I going to control all of those features simultaneously?
With this is a Waldo. Waldos are mechanical motion capture devices that mimic the physical structure of the thing you're trying to control. As you can see here, this resembles his shoulder mechanism and loosely resembles the shape of his arm. Now, it's actually a lot less complex than it seems, because I've got some very simple sensors in each of the joints in my Waldo that allow me to measure the angular position. Now, in order to measure that position, I'm using these little guys right here. These are potentiometers, and they're really easy to use with a microcontroller. You just power them up and measure this central pin, and you can get a variable voltage in this case, and I can map that to an angular position. So I just send these angular positions to my robot arm, and then I can control Claptrap. There's a little bit more to it than that, but that's the gist of it. Now, not everything is one-to-one though. I don't have flaps for hands, so I added triggers that I can squeeze to control, well, whatever I want. In this case, the upper trigger controls his flaps. Now, this Claptroller is designed for version 3 of Claptrap's arms, and it's not quite as ergonomic as I'd like, so I need to make a new one. Why are your elbows moving? Ha ha ha! His elbow broke. Whee! I'm having a good time.